MDM4U, 3.5 critical analysis. So what we're going to do is be able to be critical of statistical findings in an experiment. So there's a couple components that we should be looking at. Starting off with the sampling technique. A sample that is not representative may lead to an invalid conclusion. So we have to make sure that the individuals selected are characteristic of the individuals in the population. In a small sample, statistical fluctuations and outliers could seriously affect the results. So if people have been selected in a way that select a subset that have certain characteristics and they're overrepresented in the sample, it's going to give us an invalid result and will draw invalid conclusions. So, that being said, extraneous variables. As discussed in section 3.4, external factors can affect or obscure the relationship between an independent and dependent variable. We have to remember that correlation does not imply causation. That means that if we see that they are changing one another, affecting each other in some way, that doesn't necessarily mean that one variable is causing that change. And you can review section 3.4 to get further details on some of those different types of correlation interpretations. Example, a sample of 6 young graduates from a computer training company reveals a strong correlation between months of training and income. So, in this study, there's a correlation coefficient of 0.90. So that's a very strong relationship, and the regression line is given by this equation. That being said, there are some extraneous variables that we need to consider. A sample of 6 young graduates, so there's only 6 people who are being selected, and that's not actually the extraneous variable, that's just the sample size. 6 people is a very small sample for this computer training company. We have to think of all of the incentives. This is a computer training company who's looking to make a profit, and if that is the incentive that they have to make profit, they're going to select those 6 people that have favorable results to their training. So that being said, this is an example from the textbook, which I suggest that you read for this section to get further details on this. But what we can take from this is that the following extraneous variables need to be considered. Have any of these graduates had training prior to this course? Because that could be the direct reason why they were so, let's see here, this has training and income, so that could be the reason why they're qualified for a job that has a higher income. Next, aptitude for working with computers. So some people have more experience dealing with computers than others, and some people will be able to learn in a very short period of time and reap the benefits of this computer training, whereas if some people are absolute beginners, this might be too advanced for them to even get started. Next, access to a high-end computer. So that being said, this isn't going to necessarily be helpful for all people because not all people have equal access to the same quality of computers that are needed for this training. So, family connections to the industry. We have to remember that we're talking about income here, and if you've heard of the term nepotism, meaning the connections that you have can get you jobs. That being said, family connections to the industry, we're not considering that with any of these 6 individuals as to how they got hired with these companies that are providing this income. Tools for assessing statistical studies. When evaluating claims based on statistical studies, you must assess the methods used for collecting and analyzing the data. Some critical questions are, is the sampling process free from intentional and unintentional bias? So, think of the incentives that there are for the researcher. Is there any reason why they would be looking for a particular result? Next, could any outliers or extraneous variables influence the results? So this can sometimes be helpful if you have a background in the specific topic to be able to identify some of those extraneous variables. Next, are there unusual patterns that suggest the presence of a hidden variable? And has causality been inferred with only correlational evidence? So, based on the different types of relationships that we can have in a correlational study learned in section 3.4, we've realized that correlation does not imply causation, and that we have to be very careful when we make those claims to ensure that that is actually the direct cause. Key concepts: be cautious about accepting claims without information about the sampling technique and the analytical methods used. Intentional or unintentional bias can invalidate statistical claims. Small sample sizes can distort data, leading to invalid conclusions. An extraneous, uh, an extraneous variable can skew statistical results. So make sure, I highly suggest reading the section in the textbook to further solidify your understanding of the different factors to consider when analyzing correlational study.